Mia Reyes had a rule. She never looked back. But some things have a way of finding you even when you run from them. It was a Tuesday morning when she walked into Blackwood Enterprises for her first day as a junior accountant. She wore her best blazer, the navy one she had ironed 3 times the night before, and she carried a coffee that had gone cold because the subway was delayed. She was 23 years old, she had graduated top of her class, and she had survived things that would have broken most people. She was ready for anything. Or so she thought. The lobby was enormous, white marble floors, glass walls, the kind of place that made you feel small on purpose. A receptionist with perfect red nails handed her a visitor badge and told her to take the elevator to the 22nd floor. Mia smiled, said thank you, and walked toward the elevator like she belonged there. She did not see him until the elevator doors opened. He was standing at the end of the hallway, talking to 2 men in suits, tall, dark hair, a jaw sharp enough to cut glass. He wore a charcoal suit that looked like it cost more than her monthly rent, and he held a phone in one hand the way kings hold scepters, like the world was waiting for him to decide something. Luca Moreno. The name hit her brain before she even fully saw his face, and her feet stopped moving on their own. The coffee cup shook in her hand. Her throat went dry. He was different now, older, harder. The lanky, cruel-eyed boy from high school had grown into something much more dangerous. But the eyes were the same, dark brown, almost black, the kind of eyes that looked at people and decided immediately whether they were worth the trouble. He had decided she was not worth the trouble when they were 16. He had made that very clear. Mia remembered everything. She remembered the way he and his friends had laughed at her second-hand uniform in the 9th grade. She remembered the time they had filled her locker with crumpled paper that said, "Charity case," on every single sheet. She remembered the day she had stood up to him in front of everyone in the cafeteria, her hands shaking but her voice steady, and the way he had looked at her not with anger, but with something so cold and dismissive that it was worse. He had simply turned away, like she was nothing. She had cried in the bathroom that day. She never let him see her cry. She was not going to let him see anything now either. Mia straightened her shoulders, gripped her coffee, and walked down the hallway toward the HR office. She kept her eyes ahead. She did not look at him. She passed within 4 feet of him, and she did not so much as blink. But she heard him stop talking mid-sentence. She felt his eyes on her back, like a hand pressing between her shoulder blades. She kept walking. She reached the HR office, knocked once, and stepped inside. Only when the door closed behind her did she let out the breath she had been holding. Her hands were shaking. She pressed them flat against her thighs and breathed slowly until they stopped. "You must be Mia Reyes," said the HR manager, a cheerful woman named Dana, who had kind eyes and a desk covered in motivational magnets. "Welcome to Blackwood. We're so glad to have you." "Thank you," Mia said. Her voice came out completely calm. "I'm glad to be here." She was a very good liar when she needed to be. Dana walked her through the paperwork, the company policies, the benefits package. Mia nodded at the right moments and signed where she was told to sign, and tried very hard not to think about Luca Moreno standing in that hallway. She had known, theoretically, that Blackwood Enterprises was connected to the Moreno family. Everyone in the city knew the Moreno name. They were old money and new power, the kind of family that showed up in newspapers for charity galas and in whispered conversations for everything else. She had told herself it did not matter. She had told herself the company was huge. She would probably never even see him. She had been wrong. "One last thing," Dana said, sliding a final paper across the desk. "You'll be assigned to the executive accounting team. It's a great opportunity for someone at your level." She smiled warmly. "You'll report directly to Mr. Moreno's office." Mia looked up slowly. "Which Mr. Moreno?" she asked, even though she already knew. Dana's smile got a little wider. "Luca. He oversees everything personally. Very hands-on." She lowered her voice like she was sharing a secret. "He's very demanding, but if he likes your work, your career here will go somewhere fast." Mia set the pen down. She looked at the contract in front of her. She thought about her student loans and her rent, and the fact that she had turned down 2 other offers to take this one because the salary was nearly double. She picked the pen back up. She signed her name. This was fine. She was not the same girl she had been at 16. She was not afraid of Luca Moreno. She was not afraid of anything. And if her heart was beating a little too fast as she walked out of that office, well, that was just the coffee finally kicking in. That was all it was. Luca Moreno had a gift. He remembered faces, every single one. He had learned early that faces were information, and information was power, and power was the only thing in this world that actually kept you safe. His father had taught him that. His father had also taught him that weakness was a disease, and emotion was weakness, and by the time Luca was 18, he had learned both lessons so completely that most people who worked for him genuinely believed he did not have feelings at all. He did. He had simply gotten very good at not showing them. He was on the phone with Marco, his head of security, when the elevator doors opened. He was not paying attention to the elevator. He was paying attention to Marco telling him that there had been a problem at the South Warehouse and that 3 of their men were missing, which was the kind of problem that required his full focus. He had already run through 3 possible explanations and was working on a 4th when something made him look up. He could not explain it. He had no reason to look at the elevator. He just did. And then he saw her. For exactly 2 seconds, Luca Moreno's very organized, very controlled brain went completely blank. She was walking down the hallway with her chin up and her shoulders straight and a coffee cup in her hand, and she was looking straight ahead like nothing in the world could bother her. She was wearing a navy blazer and her dark hair was pulled back, and she had the same look on her face she'd always had, that look that said, "I see you, and I am not impressed." And Luca's hand tightened on his phone without him noticing. Mia Reyes. He had not seen her since high school, 7 years. He had not thought about her in at least 5 of those years, and he had told himself the 2 years before that did not count because he had been young and stupid and going through things that he did not like to examine too closely. But he knew her face immediately, the same way he knew every face he had ever seen, and something shifted in his chest that felt uncomfortably like recognition, mixed with something else he could not name. She walked right past him. She did not look at him. She did not slow down. She knocked on the HR office door and stepped inside without a single glance in his direction, and the door closed behind her, and Luca stood there for a full 3 seconds before he realized that Marco was still talking in his ear. "Boss, you still there?" "Yes," Luca said. "Deal with the warehouse. I'll review the report tonight." He ended the call. He stood in the hallway and looked at the closed HR office door. Mia Reyes was here, in his building, walking past him like he was furniture. He did not know how to feel about that. He was not accustomed to not knowing how to feel about things. He filed the information away and went back to his office and sat down at his desk and opened the warehouse report and read the same paragraph 4 times before he admitted to himself that he was not reading it at all. He leaned back in his chair. He looked at the ceiling. High school had not been a good time for Luca Moreno. Nobody who knew him now would believe that, because the story they knew was simple. The Morenos were powerful. Luca was born powerful. He had always been in control. But the truth was more complicated, as truth usually is. His father had been in prison for 2 of his high school years. His older brother had been trying to hold the family together and doing a terrible job of it. Their enemies had known they were weak and had been testing them constantly, quietly, in ways that showed up as threats and broken windows and rumors that the Moreno name was finished. Luca had walked into school every day of those years, knowing that if he showed any softness, any vulnerability, any kindness, it would get back to the wrong people. So he had not been kind. He had been exactly what the situation required, which was cold and controlled and completely unapproachable. He had not been good to Mia Reyes. He knew that. He had told himself at the time that he did not have the luxury of being good to anyone, which was probably true, but it was also the kind of explanation that sounded better than it actually was. There was a knock at his office door. "Come in," he said. Dana from HR stepped inside with a bright smile. Just wanted to let you know, your new junior accountant has been processed. She starts officially tomorrow. She set a file on his desk. Mia Reyes, top of her class at Alderton University. Excellent references. I think you'll be very impressed. After Dana left, he opened the file. Her photo was clipped to the top corner. Professional headshot, dark eyes, that same expression. Calm, unbothered, like she was daring the world to try her. He found himself almost smiling. Almost. He closed the file. He went back to the warehouse report. He made himself read every word this time, because there were serious things happening, and he did not have the space to think about a girl from his past who had just walked back into his present. But that night, for the first time in years, Luca Moreno did not sleep well, and he was very annoyed about it. The first week was professional, perfectly professional. Mia arrived early every morning. She learned the systems, she asked smart questions, and made zero mistakes, and kept every interaction with Luca Moreno to the absolute minimum required by her job description. When he sent emails, she replied quickly and clearly and without any extra words. When he reviewed her reports and sent back comments, she made the changes without complaint. When they were in the same room, which happened only 3 times that week, she looked at her screen or her papers and not at him. She was impressive, and she was very, very careful. Luca noticed both things. He had a habit, which his assistant Rosa called unsettling and his brother called annoying, of watching how people worked before he decided how to treat them. He had discovered over the years that people showed you who they really were in the first 10 days of a new job, before they got comfortable enough to let their guard down in the ways that actually mattered. Most people tried hard at the start, and then slowly relaxed into whatever their actual habits were. Some people were the same on day 1 and day 100, which was what he looked for, because those were the ones he could rely on. Mia was the same every day. Precise, focused, utterly unintimidated by him. That last part was the interesting one. Everyone was intimidated by him. It was not ego, it was just fact. He was the head of a company with 900 employees and a family name that made people nervous, and he had been told since he was very young that his face in particular had a way of making people want to look at the floor. Mia Reyes looked at him the same way she looked at spreadsheets, like he was something to be analyzed and dealt with efficiently, not something to be feared or impressed by. On day 8, he decided to test it. She had left a report on his desk, as she did every Thursday afternoon. It was a cost analysis of 3 vendor contracts, 12 pages, clear tables, color-coded summaries. He read it in under 10 minutes. Then he picked up his phone. Mia, my office. She came in 2 minutes later, notebook in hand, that calm face. Close the door, he said. She did. He leaned back in his chair and looked at her for a moment, without saying anything. Most people started talking to fill the silence. They apologized preemptively, or shifted their weight, or asked if something was wrong. Mia stood there and waited, perfectly still. Her eyes on him, not unfriendly but not warm either, the way you look at a professional situation you are prepared to handle. He held up the report. This is good. She blinked. Just once. Thank you. The vendor analysis on page 7. You're recommending we drop Holston Supply. Yes. Everyone else in this department has been recommending we keep them for 3 years. I know, she said. I read the previous reports. The margins look acceptable on the surface, but they've been adding micro fees to every order since 2022. Individually small. Cumulatively, over a full year, we're overpaying by $62,000. She paused. I thought you'd want to know. Luca looked at her for another long moment. Sit down. Something very small crossed her face. Not quite discomfort. More like recalculation. She sat in the chair across from his desk. How long have you been in accounting? He asked. 2 years since graduation. Before that, I worked part-time at a financial consulting firm while I was finishing my degree. Where are you from originally? The question was subtle, but she caught it. He saw it in the slight stillness that came over her. She knew exactly what he was really asking. which was whether she was going to acknowledge what both of them already knew. Cartwell, she said. Just the town name, just the facts. Cartwell was 40 minutes from the city. It was also where Blackwood Academy was, the private high school that the Moreno family had attended and funded for 3 generations. I know, he said. I know you know, she said. They looked at each other. The air in the room changed, became a little thicker, like something long overdue was sitting in the space between them, and neither of them had decided yet what to do with it. Then Luca's desk phone rang. He picked it up. Moreno. A pause. His jaw tightened. I'll be right there. He set the phone down and stood up. We'll continue this. You can go. Mia stood, tucked her notebook under her arm, and walked to the door. The Holston contract, he said. Cut them. She stopped. Her hand was on the door handle. She did not turn around, but he could see the line of her shoulders change, just slightly, like something had surprised her, even though she did not want it to. Understood, she said, and she left. Luca stood in the middle of his office for a moment after she was gone. Then he grabbed his jacket and went to deal with whatever fresh disaster the phone call had brought him, because his life was always full of those. But for the rest of the afternoon, when things got quiet between crises, he kept thinking about the way she had said, I know you know. Not angry, not soft, just honest and direct, and completely without games. He had spent 7 years surrounded by people who played games constantly. He did not know what to do with someone who just didn't. It happened on a Friday night, and Mia would spend a long time afterward wishing it had not happened on a Friday, because Fridays were supposed to be the one day she let herself relax. She had stayed late. She always stayed late on Fridays to prep the following week's reports, so Monday mornings felt less like drowning. The office had emptied out by 7. By 8:30, the only sounds were the hum of the air conditioning and the occasional ping of her computer. She had her shoes off. She had changed her playlist from jazz to something with more energy. She had eaten half a bag of crackers from her desk drawer. She was, in other words, completely off guard. She heard his voice before she saw him. Low and cold and very controlled, which meant something was wrong. She had already learned that Luca Moreno's voice got quieter when he was angry, not louder. She heard him come down the hallway and push open the glass door to the open-plan floor and walk in, still on the phone. She sat up straight and put her shoes back on under the desk. He saw her. He stopped walking for half a second, clearly not expecting anyone to be there, but then he kept going, moving to the window at the far side of the room and continuing his conversation. She went back to her screen and very conscientiously did not listen. But she could not help hearing. I don't care what Richie said. If his people were at that warehouse, it was not a coincidence. A pause. His voice dropped lower. No. Do not move on this yet. I need to verify. Another pause. Longer. His tone changed. Went flat, in a way that was somehow scarier than anger. Tell Dante to stand down. I will handle Richie personally. He ended the call. Mia kept her eyes on her screen. She typed something she immediately deleted, because it made no sense. She heard him standing there, and then she heard him walk, not toward the door but toward the kitchen alcove on the left side of the room, where the coffee machine was. She heard the machine start. She breathed. 2 minutes later, he appeared at the edge of her desk with 2 cups. He set one in front of her without asking or commenting, and sat in the empty chair across from her desk, which was the chair that visiting HR people used, and not, under normal circumstances, where the CEO of the company sat. Mia looked at the coffee, then at him. He looked exhausted. It was the first time she had seen that. The control was still there, but it was working harder than usual, like a wall that had taken a few hits and was still standing, but had started to show cracks at the edges. Thank you, she said, meaning the coffee. He nodded and drank his own. For a moment, neither of them said anything. Outside the floor-to-ceiling windows, the city glittered and hummed, all those thousands of lit windows, like something that did not know or care about whatever complicated thing was happening 22 floors above it. You work late every Friday, he said. It was not a question. You pay attention, she said. I pay attention to everything. She wrapped both hands around the cup. The coffee was good. He had made it properly, strong, which surprised her for reasons she could not fully explain. Are you going to tell me what's happening? She asked. She was not entirely sure why she asked. It was outside her job description by a significant margin. He looked at her steadily. Why would I do that? I don't know, she said honestly. You didn't have to bring me coffee either. Something in his expression shifted. Not softened exactly. More like moved. The way a heavy piece of furniture moves slightly when something pushes against it. Not enough to topple it, but enough to show that it can be moved. Business problem, he said. Someone is trying to make things difficult for my family. Is it dangerous? She asked. He was quiet for a moment. Potentially. She looked at him. He was looking at the window, at the city, and she looked at his profile and tried to find the cruel boy from high school in this person, and found him harder to locate than she expected. He was still cold, he was still controlled, he still made her want to keep her guard up constantly, but he was also sitting in an HR chair at 8:30 on a Friday night, looking like he had been carrying something very heavy for a very long time. You should go home, he said, still looking at the window. It's late. You should too, she said. He looked at her then, something almost like surprise. I'll be fine, he said. I didn't say you wouldn't be, she said, and picked up her coffee. She went back to work. He stayed in that chair for another 20 minutes, not talking, just sitting with his own thoughts and his coffee. And when she finally packed up and said goodnight, he said goodnight back, and it was such a small and ordinary word, but something about the way he said it made her stand at the elevator for a full 10 seconds after it arrived, just thinking. Then she stepped in, the doors closed, she let out a long, slow breath. She was in trouble, and she knew it, and she did not like it one bit. The name Dante Ricci appeared in Mia's life 3 days after the Friday night office encounter, and it appeared in the worst possible way. She was coming out of a coffee shop near the office on her lunch break when a car pulled up alongside her, moving slowly enough to be intentional. The window came down. The man inside was in his mid-30s, well-dressed, with a wide smile that did not reach his eyes at all. Mia Reyes, he said pleasantly, junior accountant at Blackwood Enterprises. She stopped walking. Every part of her went on alert. I'm sorry, do I know you? Not yet, he said. My name is Dante Ricci. I'm a business associate of the Moreno family. The way he said it made it sound like the opposite of what it actually was. I was hoping we could have a conversation. Mia looked at him. She thought about the phone call she had overheard. Tell Dante to stand down. She thought about Luca's voice going flat and cold. I don't think so, she said clearly. Have a good afternoon. She walked. She did not run. She kept her pace even and turned the corner, and only when she was fully around it did she reach into her bag and pull out her phone. Her fingers hesitated over the screen for a moment. She had Luca's direct number. He had given it to her the week before in case she needed to reach him with urgent financial issues after hours. She had not used it yet. Using it now, for something like this, felt like crossing a line. But something told her that ignoring what had just happened would be crossing a bigger one. She texted him. Just the facts. No drama. Dante Ricci just approached me outside the coffee shop on Meridian Street. He knew my name and where I work. I said nothing and walked away. Thought you should know. The reply came in under 2 minutes. Where are you now? She looked around. Corner of Meridian and 5th. Don't move. Someone is coming to you. 4 minutes later, a black car pulled up, and a large man named Anton, who had kind eyes and a very serious face, told her he worked for Mr. Moreno and had been asked to bring her back to the building. She got in the car. Anton did not make small talk, which she appreciated. Luca was in his office when she arrived. He was on a call, but he ended it the moment she walked in. He looked at her with that sharp, scanning look she had gotten used to, checking, she realized, for signs that something had happened to her. Are you all right? He asked. Fine, she said. He only spoke to me, nothing else. Luca moved from behind his desk. He paced once, which she had never seen him do before. It was a small loss of control, barely noticeable, but on him it stood out like a shout. What exactly did he say? She repeated it word for word. She had always had a good memory for dialogue, which had served her well in school, and was apparently serving her well in situations like this one too. Luca's expression as he listened was still, but his eyes were working very hard. When she finished, he looked at her for a moment. He shouldn't know your name. He shouldn't know anything about the people in my building. He clearly does, she said. Yes. His jaw tightened, which means someone is feeding him information. He looked at her. I need you to do something, and I need you to understand that you can say no. She waited. I need you to keep working, normally, as if nothing happened. Don't change your routine. If he contacts you again, tell me immediately, but don't react to him, don't engage with him, don't let him know that I know about this. She looked at him for a long moment. You want to use me as a way to track what he knows. He did not look away. Yes. She appreciated that he did not dress it up. She thought about it for exactly 10 seconds. All right, she said, but I want to know what's going on. Not everything. I understand you have things you can't tell me, but I'm not walking around out there without some idea of who this person is and why he's dangerous. Luca looked at her for a moment, then he nodded once, slowly, like he had made a decision. He told her things he had not told anyone outside his closest circle. He told her about Ricci's attempts to take over 3 of their legitimate business contracts, about the warehouse, about the suspicion that someone inside Blackwood was passing information. His voice was even and controlled the whole time, but she could hear what was underneath it, the weight of someone managing a situation that had been escalating for months. When he finished, the room was quiet. Why are you telling me this? She asked. Really? He looked at her. The mask slipped, just by a fraction, just enough for her to see something underneath it that was genuinely uncertain. Because, he said carefully, you are already involved, and you deserve to know why. She held his gaze. Something moved in the space between them, something that had been building since the elevator doors opened on her first day, something that neither of them had touched yet. Okay, she said quietly, I'll help. And just for a moment, just briefly, something in his face changed in a way she had never seen before. Not relief exactly, something softer than that and more unexpected. Thank you, he said. It was 2 words, but coming from Luca Moreno, she suspected, it meant considerably more. The mole was found on a Wednesday. It was one of the senior logistics managers, a man named Pierce, who had been with the company for 6 years and who had apparently been selling information to Ricci for the last 4 months in exchange for a sum of money that would have paid Mia's rent for 3 years. Luca handled it quietly and legally, and by Thursday afternoon, Pierce was gone and the locks had been changed and a new security protocol was in place. Mia found out about all of this through Rosa, Luca's assistant, who had decided at some point in the past 2 weeks to adopt Mia as a sort of workplace little sister and kept her informed of things she was not technically supposed to be informed of. Mia did not encourage this and also did not discourage it, because Rosa was warm and funny and made the kind of strong tea that fixed most problems. What Mia did not find out through Rosa was what happened on Thursday evening when she stayed late again and Luca appeared in the doorway of the open-plan floor and looked at her with an expression she had never seen on his face before. She almost did not recognize it because it was unfamiliar. It took her a moment to identify it. He looked nervous. Do you have a few minutes? He asked. She saved her work. Sure. He came in but did not sit. He stood near her desk with his hands in his trouser pockets, and he looked at the window, and then at the floor, and then at her, and Mia sat very still because she had the sudden feeling that whatever was about to happen was something significant. I owe you an apology, he said. The room was very quiet. For what happened when we were in school, he said. For how I treated you. His voice was even, but something underneath it was not. Something that was working to stay in control and finding it harder than usual. I was cruel to you. Not once, repeatedly, over a period of years. And the reasons I had at the time were real, but they were not good enough. There is no reason good enough for what I did. Mia looked at him. She had imagined this moment before, in the old complicated way you imagine things when you are young and hurt and still processing. She had imagined feeling triumphant. She had imagined telling him exactly what those years had cost her. She had imagined a dozen versions of this conversation. She had not imagined feeling the thing she felt now, which was something tired and honest and complicated. "Luca," she said. He looked at her directly when she said his name. It was the first time she had used his first name. "I know," she said simply, "and I believe you mean it." He let out a breath. Just barely, but she saw it. "I spent a long time being angry about it," she said honestly. "It affected me more than I wanted to admit. The things you did were not small." She paused. "But I also spent a long time deciding not to let it define me. And I think that decision was probably the most important thing I ever did." He was quiet. He was listening in the way he listened to everything, completely, without looking away. "So I'm not going to tell you it was fine," she said. "It wasn't fine. But I'm not going to carry it either. I let that go a while ago." She looked at him steadily. "What I'm more interested in is who you are now." Something shifted in his face, something that was almost hope, which she would not have thought she could identify on him, and yet there it was. "And?" he asked. The word came out quieter than he probably intended. She considered him, the long hours, the coffee he had made her, the way he had told her about Ricci honestly instead of spinning it, the way he had said "thank you" like it cost him something. "I'm still deciding," she said. He nodded. He looked like he had expected nothing better, and somehow still been hoping for more, which was the most human she had ever seen him. "That's fair," he said. He said goodnight and left. Mia sat at her desk for a while after he was gone and did not get any more work done, because something had just happened that could not be unfiled or put back in any drawer, and she was going to have to figure out what to do with it. She drove home in the quiet and sat in her parked car outside her apartment for 10 minutes before going inside. Above the city, the sky was doing something beautiful with the clouds, and she looked at it and thought about the strange, winding paths that brought people back around to each other. She went to bed. She did not sleep for a long time. When she finally did, she did not dream about the past. The thing that Mia did not know, and that she would find deeply amusing later, was that Luca had rehearsed the apology 4 times. Not in front of a mirror. Luca Moreno would rather walk into a dangerous situation without backup than practice emotional conversations in front of a mirror. He had done it in his car, driving to and from work, which meant that his driver Marco had heard the whole thing twice over 2 days. Marco, who was loyal to his employer in all things, had said nothing except once, on day 2, when he had said quietly, and without looking up from the road, "You should maybe just say it, boss. You're overthinking it." Luca had fired him on the spot and rehired him 12 minutes later, which was a fairly average Tuesday for Marco. What happened in the 2 weeks after the apology was a very slow, very careful, very stubborn unraveling of the wall that had been in place between them since day 1. It did not happen dramatically. It happened in small things that piled up like snow. Luca started leaving notes with her reports. Not feedback notes, just small observations. "Your analysis of the Kepler account was the clearest summary I've seen in 2 years. Once, inexplicably, a sticky note that said the coffee machine on the 3rd floor is better than the one on 22, in case you didn't know." Mia had stood at her desk, reading that sticky note with an expression that Rosa, who walked by at exactly the right moment, described to her husband that evening as the face of someone trying very hard not to smile and failing at the last second. Mia did not tell Luca that she had kept the note in her notebook. What she did do was start talking to him like a real person, not a professional contact, not a former bully she was carefully managing, not a boss she was being appropriately cautious around, a real person. She asked his opinion on things and pushed back when she disagreed and laughed at one point in a meeting about something he said that was so dry and unexpected that it came out before she could stop it. The whole room went slightly still, because people did not laugh in Luca Moreno's meetings. And then he looked at her with something in his eyes that felt dangerous in a new kind of way. And she looked back at her papers and felt warm all the way up her neck. But the really ridiculous thing happened on a Thursday. She came to her desk in the morning and found a single white rose laid across her keyboard with no note. She picked it up very carefully. She looked around the floor. Rosa was at her own desk and became suddenly very fascinated with her computer screen. Everyone else was doing the same sort of concentrated nothing. Mia stood there holding a white rose at 8:40 in the morning and felt something she had not let herself feel in a long time, which was giddy. She walked to Luca's office. She knocked twice. "Come in." She went in and held up the rose. He was at his desk, reading something. He looked at the rose. He looked at her. He looked at the rose again. His expression was perfectly composed, except for a slight tension around the eyes of someone who has done a thing and is now waiting to find out if it was a mistake. "Did you leave this on my desk?" she asked. A pause. "Yes." She looked at him for a long moment. He looked back. Neither of them moved. "Why a white rose?" she asked. "Because red seemed presumptuous," he said, and there was something in his voice that was almost careful, like he was trying to say something without saying too much. And Mia felt her chest do a thing she was very displeased about, because this was not how things were supposed to go. "Luca," she said. "Mia," he said. And then they both just stood there, which was not progress exactly, but was something, because 2 months ago they would not have been able to stand in the same room, in comfortable silence, and both of them knew it. "Come to dinner with me," he said, "not as your employer, just as a person who wants to have dinner with you." She was quiet for a moment. "If this turns into something complicated, it will affect my work." "Yes," he said honestly. "Probably." "I like my work," she said. "I know," he said. "I'd like you to keep it. I'm not going anywhere." She looked at him. He was looking back at her with that same expression she had seen on the night of the apology, the one that cost him something to show. And she had been honest when she said she was still deciding who he was now, but she thought she was fairly close to a decision. "Dinner," she said. "One dinner." "One dinner," he agreed, and the corner of his mouth moved. Just barely, but it was enough. Mia walked back to her desk, clutching a white rose, and sat down and made herself open her work files. Behind the glass wall of his office, she could see Luca pick up his phone and call someone, back to his usual composed self. Rosa appeared at the edge of her vision. "Well?" she whispered. "I'm going to dinner," Mia said quietly. Rosa pressed both hands over her mouth and made a sound that was the muffled version of something very loud. Mia shook her head and started typing. But the rose went into the small vase of water she kept on the corner of her desk, and it stayed there for the rest of the week. The dinner reservation was at a restaurant called Solis on the 27th floor of a hotel downtown, the kind of place Mia had only ever read about. She wore the green dress she had bought 2 years ago for a work event and never felt confident enough to wear. She did her hair down, she took the elevator to the lobby and told herself 4 times that this was just dinner. Luca was waiting outside the restaurant when she arrived. He was not on his phone, he was just standing there, and when he saw her come through the hotel doors, something happened in his face that was quick and unguarded and real, and it turned out that was all it took to make Mia forget every argument she had made to herself in the taxi on the way over. Dinner was 2 hours. It did not feel like 2 hours. He was different outside the office. Not completely different. He was still himself, still direct, still more comfortable being honest than being charming. But there was room for other things too. He told her about his brother, who was apparently a full disaster with terrible taste in shoes, but who Luca spoke about with a warmth that surprised her. She told him about her mother, who had worked 2 jobs to keep them afloat and had never once complained. At one point he said something that was so genuinely funny that she nearly choked on her water, and he laughed too, a real laugh, not the controlled smile she had gotten used to, and the sound of it did something to her that she decided she was not going to analyze right now. When they walked out of the restaurant, the night was warm and the city was doing its usual bright, loud, relentless thing. They stood outside the hotel, and neither of them immediately moved toward a taxi. "Thank you for coming," he said. "Thank you for the white rose," she said. He looked at her. "I'm sorry," he said, and she knew he did not mean for dinner. He meant it again, the apology from the office, but simpler now. No speech, just 2 words, and everything they carried. "I know," she said. And then, because she had spent long enough being careful, she reached up and put her hand on his arm. Just briefly, just a small thing. He looked down at her hand and then up at her face, and his expression was something she did not have a name for, but wanted to keep seeing. "I'd like to do this again," he said. "Yes," she said, "you may." He smiled. A real one, wider than she had ever seen on him, and she thought that was probably something not many people had seen, and felt quietly very glad she had. She got into her taxi. He stood on the pavement and watched her go, and she looked back once through the rear window, and he was still standing there. 3 months later, things had changed in the ways that matter. The Ricci situation resolved itself legally, through a combination of Luca's patience and the kind of careful, methodical documentation that Mia had put together herself without being asked. The evening she handed him the file, he had looked at it for a long moment, and then at her, and said, "Did you do this on your own time?" "Yes," she said. "Why?" She had looked at him steadily. "Because it matters to you," she said, "and you matter to me." He had been quiet for a long time after that, and then he had come around his desk and stood close to her and looked at her with that unguarded thing she had started recognizing, and he had said quietly, "You are the most surprising person I have ever met in my life." She had said, "Good." He had kissed her then, carefully, like something being handled well for the first time after being handled badly before, like something worth getting right. She had kissed him back. Across the city, in the lobby of Blackwood Enterprises, the receptionist who had given Mia her visitor badge on her first day was telling the new intern that the boss had been smiling recently, actually smiling, and nobody could figure out why. The intern, who was 21 and observant, said maybe something good happened to him. The receptionist thought about it. "More like something good happened to him a long time ago," she said, and then came back. Upstairs on the 22nd floor, Mia Reyes was at her desk finishing a report. On the corner of her desk was a small vase. There was always a white rose in it now. She had stopped pretending that she did not love that. Luca passed her desk on the way to his office and put a cup of coffee down without stopping. She picked it up. She did not say thank you, and he did not say you're welcome, because after 3 months, they had a language for these things that did not require words. She worked, he worked, the city outside did its relentless, glittering thing, and somewhere in the middle of all of it, without anyone planning it, without either of them meaning for it to happen quite this way, the Mafia boss got tamed by the girl he once bullied. Not because she tried to change him, not because she forgave him quickly or made things easy, but because she showed up exactly as herself, every single day, and refused to be anything less. And that, it turned out, was the one thing Luca Moreno had never in his life known how to walk away from.